I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I am here to do a solo episode. In the interest of full disclosure, I attempted to do this, I did do this solo episode at the recent Best Ever conference in Denver, but it didn't record. So I didn't have it to get out to you, but I thought there was a sort of important message there. So I'll tell you a little bit about why it was a solo episode and kind of why I recorded at the Best Ever conference. And then I'll tell you the story behind it. But basically, a couple months ago, I was invited to go on the Best Ever conference live podcasting stage at the conference, and I thought that was sort of an opportunity I couldn't pass up. I thought a lot about it leading up to that time, and the time slots were 30 minutes. And what really for me this podcast is all about letting the guests tell their story. And I felt like in the 30-minute time slot, that might be constrained on what I could allow a guest to tell about themselves. And I just didn't really feel like that was something I wanted to cut short. That's why I decided to do a solo podcast. It's okay to cut myself off if I have to, but I don't like doing that to my guests. A big part of this podcast is letting the guests tell their story. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of podcasts out there that are shorter format and are fantastic, and I listen to them. It's just not what this one is. And so that's why I decided to go with a solo podcast. There were 1,000 people at the conference. So 1,000 people I would be happy to have on this podcast and share their story. I just didn't want to constrain them in terms of time. I just got thinking about some of my past guests. My very first podcast episode was with Jim Biggs, and for which I am forever grateful. But Jim basically talked for, I think, over an hour before I had to say anything. He really took us through his story, his journey, and I felt that was extremely meaningful to people listening and extremely meaningful to him to be able to go through it and sort of work that out. And I'm very grateful that he was willing to share all of that with me and my audience. So that was quite frankly about the best way a first-time podcaster could have had his guest be, because he was really able to carry the story. But what I then found out is that was a format that a lot of my guests have really enjoyed. Another guest that came to mind, I had David Grabiner, the DIY landlord, if you follow him on social, but he came on my podcast. Again, I was extremely grateful, but he said to me the reason he came on the podcast was because he had listened to Jim Biggs' episode and saw that I allow people to tell their whole story for as much as they want. And that's what kind of got him, and his story was amazing. So long story short, my idea, my sort of philosophy behind this podcast is that I want the guests to have as much time as they need. And so that's really kind of how I structured it, and didn't want to deviate from that format. So I decided to do a solo episode. The second contributing factor to why I decided to do a solo episode is because I wanted to get into a little bit about the power of why. And I'm going to say why a lot, but the power of why, and why this podcast is named Know Your Why. Because about 2 weeks, almost exactly prior to the Best Ever conference, I was at a veterinary conference. And as those of you who know me know, I am a veterinary surgeon. That's my career. This was a veterinary surgery conference, right? So this is a place that I feel like I fit in. Um, so during that conference, there was a banquet dinner. One of the nights, couple days into the conference, there was a banquet dinner, as there is every year at this same conference. As it turned out, any of my sort of closer friends that were at the conference either had to leave before it got to the banquet night, or just weren't attending it for whatever reason. So sort of a perfect storm of things led me down the path of I was going to be going to the banquet dinner by myself. Not a big deal. I know these people. I don't necessarily know them well, but again, they're colleagues of mine in the veterinary community. So I went down to the banquet dinner by myself. Walked into the room. It was a very large room with round tables. People were sitting down. People were talking. And I had, for the first time in my life at 47 years old, I had a panic attack. I got so overwhelmed by being in a place full of people that I didn't know them well, didn't feel comfortable sort of just walking up and talking to them, that I'm not sure if anybody saw this, and it was a little bit of a blur in my mind, but I think I stood kind of off in the corner of the room, turning in circles, looking for anyone that I might recognize. And ultimately I turned and walked out of the room. I just couldn't focus. I started to like I said, I had a panic attack. I didn't know that's what it was. I just was like, I got to get out of here. Went back to the hotel room. By the time I got back to my hotel room, I realized that my heart was racing. I was out of breath. I didn't know what was happening. I said this, I haven't had a panic attack ever before. And so I can only assume that that's what was going on. But I, sort of reached out to some people I know who have had them to see, hey, is this what this is? Took me a few hours to settle. Took me a long time for my heart rate to get down. And it was, the actual act of the panic attack, if it's happening, I guess is not particularly scary, knowing that it should ultimately end. And I know that people have them much worse than I did. So I'm not minimizing, but I'm saying I felt like, okay, eventually this will calm down. I'll be okay. But the reason I tell you that story is because I knew after that, 2 weeks later, I was going to my very first live real estate conference, this best ever conference for 2022. This is the first time I've been to a live real estate conference. I knew there were going to be a whole lot of people there, and I would know very few of them. So naturally, I really sort of went down the rabbit hole in my head of, well, what if this happens again? I'm supposed to go there and do this live podcast in front of people. What if I just have the same issue and I have another panic attack, and just kind of all of those fears that I guess would be natural to have in that scenario. And so I spent the whole 2 weeks leading up to the conference thinking, maybe I just won't go. Okay, I should go. It's a good opportunity to meet people and network. And if I have a panic attack, I just go back to the hotel room. Then I was like, I can't do the podcast live. I just kept having all of these negative thoughts, limiting beliefs in my head. And it was overwhelming and hard. And I really did consider, not going. I'm definitely an introvert by nature. And so I consider not going, but I went. I made myself go. And this is why I say your why is so powerful, because at the end of the day, I knew that going to this conference would help me and my real estate business. I knew it was an opportunity to go and network with some, incredibly successful people, other investors, and the amount of knowledge that was in that conference was unbelievable. And so I knew it was a valuable thing to do. And I knew doing the podcast live was also a very sort of valuable opportunity for me. So I did what I have done throughout this journey, when things scared me, were uncomfortable, whatever it was, and I thought about my why. And I thought, okay, my family is my why. Is there anything I wouldn't do for them? And at the end of the day, that answer to that question is no. And so that meant I was going to that conference because I believe this is all for them. And I was uh, pleasantly surprised to not have any panic attacks at the at the conference. The conference was pretty amazing. A lot of just incredibly knowledgeable people about kind of the financial markets of the world, the current state of change in the world, in the financial world, people who have incredible investment portfolios and things like that, people with a ton of knowledge on asset management. I mean, you could go on and on about how the how much brain power was in those rooms. And the reality is that despite all of that, despite all of the actionable information, advice, lectures that happened there, there were two things that really, really mattered. One was the networking, and people were incredibly nice, genuine, willing to talk to someone who I would consider still a newbie in this game, and in myself. But people no one treated me that way. No one had any hesitation in talking real estate with me. I met a number of people who you almost think of them as like idols that you would see. You see them on social media and things like that. But so the networking was incredibly important. People always say it, your network is your net worth. It couldn't really be more true than you would see in a situation like this. But the second thing, and really the thing that struck me, is that amongst all of these lectures, all of these incredibly successful people, the main theme, the main focus was mindset and impact. Okay. Mindset and impact. Two things that I think are unbelievably important. Mindset, of course, to get to the level of success that many of them have reached. There was a lecture from Don Wemmer who, sort of embarrassingly, I didn't know who it was until I sort of looked deeper, and he talked about his background, why he shouldn't be where he is, but he also told us he's got billions of dollars of assets under management, his own plane, all of the things on paper that people might use to define success. But what he talked about was investing for impact, and how all of his investing at this point is truly in the light of giving back. All of his employees are required to have impact, and giving back as part of their essentially mandate to work for him. I mean, it was so incredibly inspiring that he didn't come there to boast about what he'd done. He could have. I mean, it's remarkable. But he came to tell you what you do when you get there, and lead by example. So that was an incredibly impactful talk. And then Joe Fairless, I think most everybody in the real estate world knows who he is, and this is his conference. The Best Ever Conference is his conference. Joe Fairless gave an amazing keynote speech, and one of the things that he pointed to towards the end of his speech, he really kind of put up a slide with 5 or 6 actionable, impactful items. But he said one of them that really stuck out to me was, when you're frazzled, then volunteer. Right. So basically his idea is, when things get overwhelming, when your head gets sort of out of whack, volunteer, do something impactful, and it will give you perspective. So it's just, I guess maybe I didn't expect that sort of thing. I thought, hey, maybe it's going to be a place where people talk about how wealthy they are and how amazing that is and stuff. And sure, it's great. Money is a very, very useful tool, but they're not using it for anything other than good, which is pretty incredible. So I just thought this was important to kind of get out there. Like I said, I did this live at the on the podcast stage, and I'm very grateful for them allowing me to do that. But I always ask people at the end of every episode a series of 4 questions. And so I've talked a lot about my why. The first question always, what is your why? I've talked a lot about my why. It's my family, and it's the impact I can have on the veterinary community in a positive way. I mean, in a nutshell. I don't need to go through it all over again. We'll skip over things that you don't know about me, because that's not really the point of this. Although I will say that for sure I intend to start a charitable foundation at some point. So I hope sooner rather than later. Third thing, how can you reach me? Well, this is my podcast, so you've found me if you're listening, but probably my most place in terms of social media, my most activity is on Instagram, and it's at Lark Capital. You can also email me, jason@larkcapital.com. But the final thing, really what I wanted to get to was the final question, and that is, what is one piece of advice I would give to people trying to get started or reach a level of success that's above where they think they are right now. And it's cliche, but without a doubt, I learned here that it's so true, and that is, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Right? You're going to have to take some risks. You're going to maybe look silly at times. You're going to have you might have some failures. You might have some missteps. You might have some bad partnerships. You might have a panic attack in the middle of a live podcast event, which thankfully I did not. But these are things that, when your why is strong enough and you know exactly what that is, the rest of it's gravy. It doesn't matter. You're just pushing forward through getting to that point that you have set for yourself that can fulfill your why. Spoiler alert, that point just keeps moving away because your why will evolve. But the reality is to take those next steps. It's all about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Okay. So thanks for listening. Hope everyone has a great day. Take care.
I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.